quickly I became a blackout drinker. To be honest, I think I was probably a blackout drinker from day dot. And Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I would hit it hard. Sunday, I would stop and I would be able to stop. And I hadn't started drinking in the morning. Yes, I was blacking out, but I was still waking up in my own bed. There was consequences, but they weren't dire consequences. Right. They certainly weren't enough for me at 19 or 20 to say, oh God, I've got a drinking problem. Getting sober in your 20s, I think, presents a set of unique challenges. Got to the stage where I think I was, upwards of 10 hospitalizations, and I just had to come to terms with the fact that the only reason I was ending up in hospital black and blue was because of alcohol. But then the periods in between where I would try and stay sober and live a sober life, I had no support or no knowledge. During that period, like what went on between my 2 years was the most insufferable chaos, that it was sort of these two evils that I was presented with. And the first drink would alleviate that chaos for a nanosecond, and then more chaos would ensue. So it was like, which was the worst of the two evils almost, being sober and being met with all my feelings, all the sort of rage, loneliness, isolation, stuff I'd never learned to tackle, or be, mummified and not know where I'd end up, or if I'd even come out of it, because I binge drank. The more I binged and the more time in between the binges, the more the cycle became sort of insufferable, in the sense that, I'd get a couple of weeks sober, so therefore I can't be an alcoholic because I don't drink every day.
Right.
But I was a chronic alcoholic because the first drink I had no control. After that, choice, freedom was off the table. MK was on a one-way track to chaos and ruining her life. I didn't control the alcohol controlled me. I was in a black cab, which I love, and I was chatting to the cab driver because I love chatting, and opening a bottle of 7-Up, and he said, I said, is it okay to open, thing? I was being very polite, obviously, and then he said, oh yeah, as long as there's no vodka in it. And I said, oh no, I said, not for me, I'm an alcoholic in recovery. And he caught his mirror and he went, are you sure? And I was like, wow, because I live in a circle of people who are very well informed that alcoholics can be anyone, your bus driver, banker, doctor, whoever.
Yep.
Alcoholics are everywhere. It's the great leveler, it's the great democratic disease, however you want to put it. But there is a whole sect of society out there who still see an alcoholic as somebody who is of no fixed abode, living on the side of the street, quite aggressive, probably disheveled looking. And that's just not the case. And if we don't talk about how we got well, how are we going to help somebody else?
Welcome to School of Rock Bottom with Oliver Mason. I'm an actor, a voiceover artist and a recovery coach who's been sober 9 years. And I know firsthand that rock bottom can be the greatest teacher and the springboard for a beautiful life. And as you know, I interview fellow creatives and all inspiring people that have hit rock bottom, survived and thrived. This is a podcast of hope and how to get out of the darkness into the light. And that's why I'm really excited today, because I've got the marvellous Mary Kate, aka MK, in the studio. How you doing?
Good, Oliver. It's great to be here.
It's so nice of you to come and see me today and be a guest on my podcast. If you don't know Mary Kate, shame on you. You will now. So a quick bio. Mary Kate, or MK, is a contributing writer to various publications. Most recently, she wrote about her battle with addiction and journey into recovery for The Times, which has now reached millions of people. I also found a link to it on Twitter and it had 4.4 million views. I was like, wow, this really has gone viral. MK hopes by opening up about her own struggles, she can help people, particularly young people, feel less alone with their struggles and offer hope to those battling addiction. Amazing. I've warned you about the first question.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you to share with the listeners and viewers a rock bottom moment. And from that, we're going to get into the light, joy and recovery.
Okay, great. Yeah, I suppose for me, my biggest rock bottom was the time before I went to rehab for the last time. And it was the day I was actually due to go in. There was like an administration error. So I was sort of in between finding out whether I was going to go in or not. And at that stage, I'd been about a week sober. And now a week feels like nothing, but back then I was clawing on to every day, like 24 hours at a time, minute by minute at sometimes, for the first few days after that last relapse, I couldn't stand long enough for the kettle to boil. I was so physically ill. And I remember it was a beautiful day and we were on the way, and my mum and I stopped for some lunch because we were waiting to hear back from the administration about checking in because it was quite strict. And we walked into this hotel and I saw like older gentlemen sat at the bar drinking, and it was quite early actually. It was much earlier than lunch. And I just thought, oh my God, get me out of here because I will drink. And the only thing that stopped me drinking that day was they told me when I had my admission interview, you just need to stay sober until the day you come in, otherwise you won't be admitted. And I really felt if I hadn't been removed from society, physically taken out of my own reality, then I would have drank again. I had to get into rehab. And that was the rock bottom, really, because I think for me, I had so many hospitalizations, so many black and blue, bruises, not knowing where I'd got them. I had so many moments like that, waking up in hospital, with a week where I can barely remember what happened, which started out, of a Friday night, I'll just go out for a couple of drinks, something I could never do in the end. And I think knowing then the sheer terror that if I didn't get the help I needed, I was going to drink again. Knowing that, I think, was my rock bottom. And I did go to rehab and I did my 28 days and I haven't drank since.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you're over a year now, is that right?
Yeah, I'll be 16 months, a day at a time, sometime in the next week or two.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And you're in your 20s. I never will divulge a lady's age.
25. I'm going to be 26 on Friday.
That's amazing. Well, it's important to acknowledge that as well. Not only are you over a year sober, but you're in your 20s as well. And that's something definitely that we're going to talk about. In terms of sort of leading up to getting into treatment, I mean, reading your article that kind of almost went, well, it did go viral online. It was an amazing piece of writing. And also what struck me was, wow, this is a lot like my story. My alcoholism was chronic and severe, and it sounds like yours really was as well. I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to kind of pick out some bits from the article that I was like, oh my God, twins. You said in the article a couple of times you got to a place where you couldn't live with alcohol and you couldn't live without it. I wondered if you could just flesh that out a little bit more for me, what you meant by that.
Yeah, I sort of got to the stage where I think I was, upwards of 10 hospitalizations, and I just had to come to terms with the fact that the only reason I was ending up in hospital black and blue was because of alcohol. But then the periods in between where I would try and stay sober and live a sober life, I had no support or no knowledge of how to live in recovery, which I'm sure we'll come on to. So during that period, like what went on between my 2 years was the most insufferable chaos, that it was sort of these two evils that I was presented with. And the first drink would alleviate that chaos for a nanosecond, and then more chaos would ensue. So it was like, which was the worst of the two evils almost, being sober and being met with all my feelings, all the sort of rage, loneliness, isolation, stuff I'd never learned to tackle. Or be, mummified and not know where I'd end up, or if I'd even come out of it. So yeah, I was just, I think, maladjusted to life. And the more, because I binge drank, the more I binged and the more time in between the binges, the more the cycle became sort of insufferable, in the sense that, I'd get a couple of weeks sober, so therefore I can't be an alcoholic because I don't drink every day.
Right.
But I was a chronic alcoholic because the first drink, I had no control. After that, choice freedom was off the table. MK was on a one-way track to chaos and ruining her life. I didn't control the alcohol controlled me. So just in terms of living, with it or without it, yeah, I couldn't envisage a life. Envisage a life where I would never drink again.
Yeah.
But then I learned it's not about never drinking again. It's not about never doing anything again. It's just about doing your best for today. Trying to lead a sober day, pillow to pillow. And it just became so much more manageable.
Yeah, I'm the same. I just kind of, it's like a daily deal. Still is a daily deal. And if you can break it up that way, becomes a pleasure. I've found with in a while, and the idea that I might not ever drink again is not as scary. It's kind of like, yeah, Ollie, you might not eat a horseshit sandwich again. It's like, well, I hope that's the case. Do you know what I mean? That sounds all right. I mean, you sort of alluded to the kind of progression of it, but it sounds like there was a period where it was just kind of confined to weekends, which is something I used to do. I thought, well, I can go hit it hard on the weekend, and that doesn't mean I've got a problem because that's what everybody else does. Were you doing a similar thing for a while?
Absolutely. I moved to London when I was 18 off the back of sort of dropping out of uni and started working for this American company. And there was a big booze culture there. Work hard, play hard. Prior to that, I hadn't been exposed to this sort of, wine Wednesday, thirsty Thursday, team drinks on a Friday, boozy lunches. And I was sort of catapulted into that at, the age of 18 and desperately trying to keep up, because at that time, 25-year-olds seemed so sophisticated to me. So it was always like chasing in a similar way when I was chasing the booze in the end. But then it was sort of a weekend thing, and it was sort of this celebration, you've done a really good week graft, time to like loosen up, and the booze would set in. And quickly I became a blackout drinker. To be honest, I think I was probably a blackout drinker from day dot. And Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I would hit it hard. Sunday, I would stop, and I would be able to stop. And I hadn't started drinking in the morning, for my first few years. I think it's important to say this as well. I wasn't drinking in the morning. Yes, I was blacking out, but I was still waking up in my own bed. I was getting home. I wasn't losing my keys. I was, going out. There was consequences, but they weren't dire consequences. Right. They certainly weren't enough for me at 19 or 20 to say, oh God, I've got a drinking problem.
Sure.
And I think, being able to confine it to the weekend and keep down relatively stressful jobs, led me to believe, sort of fed the denial of the disease that I didn't have a problem. But actually the point was I was, confining it, but that was only going to last, that had a sell-by date.
Yeah. I think Robin Williams called Blackouts his soul going into a witness protection program, which I quite like. There was a time I remember with my blackouts that they were quite funny. I mean, I don't remember many times, but I sort of remember at uni sort of going, what happened last night? Oh, I don't remember. Oh, brilliant. Must have been a good night. And then something happened where they just became terrifying and just like losing massive periods of time. My all-time record blackout, this is going to be quite scary to admit, was about 3 weeks.
Wow.
I lost 3 weeks at one point.
Wow.
Not quite sure where they went, to the point where a friend had to show me a newspaper to convince me of the date because I thought he was lying. I
had the thing with dates as well. I remember coming out of my second last binge before I got sober, and I had lost about 8 or 9 days and I couldn't stop clicking my phone every few minutes to remind myself of the date and that we were in summer and of the year. And it was so confusing to me. I just couldn't understand how I'd lost, nearly 9 days.
Yeah.
And I'd been in and out of hospital during that time and I hadn't even registered.
It just washes you away, you get swept away, and days and hours, they all just merge. And I was just finding receipts and going, oh, that's what I was doing on that day at that time.
Or like a photo on your phone where you'd see something and go, okay, that's where I was.
Random bits of food around the house. Oh, I have eaten something by the looks of things.
And I heard as well, somebody said to me recently, the average or normal drinker, however you want to phrase it, they don't have blackouts. They generally don't black out. It's quite a rare experience. Whereas for me, it was constant.
Yeah, it was the same for me as well. Yeah. I mean, some people sort of experience, I had a shot at the bar and then I don't remember anything. And that's when someone's blood alcohol spikes to a certain level. I think there's parts of the brain that retain memories that literally shut down. But like you say, most people, it's kind of, they can pinpoint, that time I went out and I forgot.
Yeah.
Whereas it became really quite regular for me as well. I mean, you really own this word alcoholic. I mean, I think the Sunday Times headline or front title was I'm a Gen Z or Gen Z alcoholic.
Yes.
And it's in your bio and Instagram. It's a word that you actually really embrace when I find that modern culture is sort of trying to use different words now. Alcohol use disorder, alcoholism, problem drinker. All of these phrases are gradually getting put to one side, and they're kind of being, I'm going to say, soft soaped with other words. I understand the reasons why people do it. And I know it's done in order to help people that maybe feel put off by this word seeking treatment. So I understand that it comes from a good place. However, I'm with you. I kind of embrace the word, particularly within my recovery community. Why for you is the word alcoholic important?
I think two reasons. I think one being, for me, I see the disease of alcoholism as one of like a maladjusted perspective to life, and also like a total denial. It's a disease that your brain will tell you do not have, no matter how many consequences there are. So for me, if I am to start, because I saw this before I got into recovery, I saw this a lot where I would hate the word and I would loathe someone else saying it to me, and I'd be very tetchy. Whereas when I began to use the word, and when I was about 4 months sober, it was my first time telling someone I was an alcoholic, and it felt very freeing. And it also just started to break down that element of denial that was going on in my, head around it. And it is, to be honest, I do find it's quite a nerve-wracking thing to do, to tell someone in a general conversation that you're an alcoholic, or to say that you're an alcoholic. But I feel like, if we talk about it, we take the power out of it. I heard recently, shame only grows in the dark. So as soon as we open up about something, once we cast the light on the shame dissipates. Yeah. And that's definitely true in my experience, because I remember being in a taxi and I was in a black cab, which I love, and I was chatting to the cab driver because I love chatting, and
I'm glad I had you on this show then. Bit of luck. Chatting might be required.
I was opening a bottle of 7-Up and he said, I said, is it okay to open, thing? I was being very polite, obviously. And then he said, oh yeah, as long as there's no vodka in it. And I said, oh no. I said, not for me. I'm an alcoholic in recovery. And he caught his mirror and he went, are you sure? And I was like, wow, because I live in a circle of people who are very well informed that alcoholics can be anyone, your bus driver, banker, doctor, whoever. Yep. Alcoholics are everywhere. It's the great leveler, it's the great democratic disease, however you want to put it. But there is a whole sect of society out there who still see an alcoholic as somebody who is of no fixed abode, living on the side of the street, quite aggressive, probably disheveled looking. And that's just not the case. And I think particularly for young people, I'm an alcoholic through and through, chronic, chronic by the age of 23 probably. So I think by me opening up about it, particularly, young men and women, perhaps at university, who are going through this. And off the back of the article, I've had so many people reach out to me and share their own experience with me, and how, they haven't been able to label it, and it might help them, say, yeah, that's me too.
And it's also important to recognize as well that Elton John's an alcoholic, but he's not had a drink in 36 years. And I'm not outing him because he's just been celebrating it on social media. But he's an alcoholic. So I think a lot of the problem with the word as well is people might assume that you're still drinking.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I can understand people wanting to also say, I'm a recovering alcoholic, I'm a recovered alcoholic. I mean, that's a big, that's another whole podcast.
Yeah.
But I think generally people just use it. I wouldn't go into one of my recovery groups and kind of say recovered alcoholic, even though a day at a time, that's how I feel. I know it's only a 24-hour deal, or recovering, because I don't want the newcomer who's coming into that group, whatever that group is, to feel that I'm any different to them. Because, I often say to people in rehab, what time did you get up this morning? And they'll be like, I got up at 5 a.m. because I couldn't sleep. I'm like, great, you've been sober longer than me. This daily thing. But I think this word alcoholic is so loaded. And I just worry that if the medical community and the recovery community kind of stops using it and replacing it with other words, I think there's a real fear that the stigma could grow, actually.
I agree with you. And I think, the like empathy bridge, or whatever you want to call it, is education, right? Whatever the issue we have in society where there's hostility or stigma around it, the solution is educating people in a way that people are receptive to. And I think like my experience anecdotally is overwhelmingly positive when I say to people in, you know, at a dinner party, when I'm out socially, that, oh yeah, I'm an alcoholic, I don't drink. Obviously there are times and places when these things can be said, you know, and I pick and choose. I'm not, you know, going around waving a flag saying I'm an alcoholic, but I do try and be as open as I can about it. And I think that's just so, so important. More people like me and you just using the word as if, you know, oh, I'm a celiac. It would be amazing to think, you know, I'm 25 now. If I, you know, have children when they're adults, that they could say, you know, I'm a diabetic, I'm an alcoholic, I'm an addict. If they could say those things in the same vein, because at the end of the day, it's an illness, you know. I have anxiety, I'm an alcoholic. I don't think they should be any different. And I do worry about people trying to change the wording or the narrative, because I'm wondering, does that sort of breed a cycle of, oh, there's shame around this word, when actually it's incredibly healing to a lot of people to be able to just name it.
I think my perspective is it's a word that has to continually be in the conversation, but at the same time I also believe that people can use any wording they want for themselves that empowers them. You know, I might have said this on a previous episode, but I got one friend in recovery. I once met him in the National Theatre bar, and someone asked him, you know, do you drink? And like Brian Blessed, he stood on a chair and went, I can't drink because I'm a chronic alcoholic. And he announced it to the bar. And I got another friend in recovery that just says that they're retired. You know, oh, you're not drinking. Why not? Oh, because I'm retired. And he just says that because he doesn't want to disclose too much information. I must admit, though, you've made me braver, because I tend not to use the word. Just being completely honest, I'm not as brave as you. Like, I wouldn't, like, even putting it on my Instagram. You know, I've put 9 years sober on my Instagram, and that was like, oh my God. Yeah. So I really applaud you, because you're actually a lot braver than me, because I tend to only use it in recovery circles and not outside.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You know what? For me, I think it was sort of like a rip the bandage off moment. You know, because I was kind of concerned about it for a while. I was like, oh, you know, if I start dating now, people are going to read about me online and just see that I'm an alcoholic or whatever, you know, without the context.
Would you say on a first date? I'm just throwing in the deep end now.
Go for it. I've actually been on a first date recently, and I didn't know. I did once, but I wasn't that interested in the guy, and he almost fell off his chair. Kind of, I told him I was a raging alcoholic. So
that was quite useful to get rid of him.
Yeah, exactly. It was 45 minutes. It was perfect. And quite quickly. So yeah, I pick and choose my moments. I normally say something like, you know, Booze was a terrible boyfriend to me. We had to break up. You know, Booze and I broke up a while ago. You know, I was at a party recently, and the guy next to me was quite insistent on pouring wine into my glass, and I was like, no. And he was like, are you sure? And I was like, no. And as the night went on, I was like, look, I've drank enough for 10 sailors. If you want me to get out of here alive, I'm going to stick to the Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, great. You know, and I'm quite high energy, so I find that often if I'm out in social settings, people will just assume that whatever's in my glass is alcohol, because I'm quite, I find it's quite freeing, I think, to be able to go out socially, and if it does present itself, I can tell people that I don't drink, that I'm an alcoholic. I'm not hiding it, or I'm not saying, oh, I'm not drinking because I'm driving. You know, there's great freedom in not keeping it a secret anymore. And I really think what spurred me on to use the word alcoholic more and more and more is to try and help younger people like me to just normalize the conversation around it.
This is actually a really refreshing conversation. I don't think this is happening at the moment in the recovery community, nowhere near enough. I think people are saying it in, you know, in recovery communities, in church basements quite freely, but not in public. And I worry that these other terms that are coming in are actually stigmatizing more than they think they are. Slightly controversial perspective, but that's my fear of it. You know, when I use words like alcohol use disorder and stuff, for myself, it feels very odd. Not for other people, that's fine. It's particularly in a rehab setting, but for myself to say I've got alcohol use disorder, it sounds really odd.
It sounds odd to me, and it sounds uncomfortable. And also, you know, it's like we live in an age now where everyone wants to sort of label and put boxes, and I feel like there's a lot of labels going on, you know, and I feel also society is incredibly polarized in senses. You know, if you look at like, not to get into a political debate, but, we've got conservative, Labour, lefty, righty, all of these sort of things. So I'm like, with something as, dangerous as the disease of addiction, why start changing the labeling? I just think, for me personally, I've no problem with somebody else saying, oh, I've got an alcohol use disorder. I also don't take umbrage with that, but I do think it's important for me on a personal level to say I'm an alcoholic, and to, if I'm going to be public about it, be very truthful.
I think that's really at the core of this conversation, isn't it? It's about doing what works for you. I don't think we're saying that everybody has to go out and label themselves this thing, but I think it's also important to show the other side of the coin. This episode is sponsored by Gavin Sisters, the passionate teetotal founders of the Detox Balm Retreat and the creators of Funky Coffee. If you love the taste of coffee but want to ditch the crash, Funky Coffee is your new go-to. Made from triple certified organic Arabica coffee and infused with powerful mushrooms, it gives you all the energy and none of the jitters. Plus, it's amazing for your gut, skin, and athletic performance. And if you're looking to recharge your body and mind, you've got to check out the Detox Barn. This award-winning retreat, located in both the UK and the Algarve, is a plant-based, alcohol-free sanctuary where you'll learn how to be healthier, happier, and more balanced. Whether it's for a weekend away or a full restorative retreat, just visit gavinsisters.co.uk and use the code School of Rock Bottom for 10% off your next retreat, or a bag of their amazing Funky Coffee. That's School of Rock Bottom for a 10% discount for a healthier, happier you. Go check them out. It's really interesting as well, looking at your story. I mean, just while we're on the subject of sort of sober dating and, making up excuses why you're not drinking, does zero beer, I often ask guests for this, does it play a role in your recovery? Would you be there with a Beck's Blue in a bar?
No, because I was a Pinot Grigio lady through and through. That was my poison from day dot, and that was it,
Booze-free wine?
No.
No.
So I think beer is kind of ghastly anyway, so
I'm with you on that.
I would never have drank it socially. Towards the end I would have drank anything, but in recovery I don't see apart from it. Now, I might go on in my recovery and you might see me with a zero alcohol whatever, but right now I just don't feel like it plays a part in my recovery. Right now I'd be quite wary of stuff like that, to be quite honest. I'd be quite wary of anything that says it's alcohol free. Why does it need to say it, sort of thing? So I just stick to my sort of soft drinks and sort of elderflower presses and stuff like that. And I drink a lot of Coca-Cola when I go out socially. So I kind of avoid those things. I'm just afraid that it would sort of set off a thought or a...
Yeah, I mean, someone told me recently that the zero Guinness tastes just like Guinness. I'm like, well, I definitely can't drink that then. Because why would I want to taste something that tastes just like alcohol? Doesn't make any sense. And also the kind of prop element, it's like, I've got, it's like saying to someone in recovery from cocaine, I've got some 0% cocaine. Why don't you go and snort that in the toilet? It'd be bizarre, wouldn't it? So,
very much so.
Again, I'm not against it. I understand why people are into it, and why it's useful. But for me personally, it's pretty off the table as well. I thought we might have that in common. I know there's going to be people shouting at me now on YouTube going, zero beers are great and they've saved my life, and I hear that too for others. So I'm certainly not against them. You talk a lot about the invisible line. What does that mean to you? Invisible line.
I think this is quite interesting because since going public about my story, I've had quite a few friends reach out to me who are not alcoholics, but they are worried about their consumption or elements of consequences from, a night out. And they might call me and confide in me about it. And I think for an alcoholic, in my experience, that invisible line, you cross all of these sort of like moral codes or boundaries or things you say that you'd never do, without confiding in someone and going, I'm a little bit concerned. I woke up in a wet bed last night. I had lipstick on my forehead. I don't remember 4 hours. I've got all these receipts from, a postcode that I'd never heard of. That sort of stuff was happening to me, and I'd keep that to myself. isolated incidents, half as less serious as that happening to friends of mine, they would be quite worried. They would be like, okay, I need to address this. What happened? Whereas I think for an alcoholic, there's this sort of, invisible line, and you don't realize until you've well and truly crossed it. And like suddenly your life is in sort of disarray.
Yeah.
And you go, oh my God, when did that happen? But the problem is you don't see it happening. It almost like you're shocked into the future and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That wreckage. It's like this trailer playing, back at you.
Yeah, some people can see the consequences kind of coming towards them. I was definitely the kind of chronic and severe type like you, where I was just like, I had to completely cross the line and, like be in a hospital and suddenly be like, oh, this has changed.
Yeah.
And like, what the hell is going on? Also, something that we have in common is hospitals, unfortunately. Wow. So you had about 10 visits, you reckon?
I think it's probably more than that, upwards of 10. Yeah. Quite serious ones. I've been rescued and taken to hospital with, like really high fatal blood alcohol levels.
Yeah.
Not really sure of the exact science of that, but basically, you're in this limbo period where they don't know if you're going to make it through the night or something.
Right.
That's happened to me quite a few times.
Yeah.
And for everyone that's different. That could be me not eating for 2 days and drinking 4 bottles of wine and basically like sitting in a stupor, and that would cause me to have, fatal blood alcohol levels and be unresponsive and be taken to hospital and put on a drip and, luckily just the luck of the draw to make it out alive.
I think for some people, I'm sure a lot of this there must be a genetic component as well. Just alcohol seems to just like completely grip some people physically. I think you shared one picture online in hospital. I sort of saw myself a little bit because I went very, very skinny. I stopped eating. I was shaking a lot. I was a complete mess. I should have died on a few occasions. And when I read your story, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds familiar.
I couldn't understand how, and I still kind of find it amazing how people will have, a glass of wine with their supper and they will like stop and then they'll have a coffee or whatever. I could never eat. Once the Pinot was in, like food was off the table. It was off the table.
So there's nothing to be jealous of. That's what I always say to people. Because there's never be jealous of someone that can just have a drink and leave it, because it can't be that great for them. Because, when you're looking at someone having that drink, in early recovery, I would have always assuming that they're getting the high that I did. So I'd see someone having a pint or a glass of wine, and I'd be really jealous, because what would happen to me, not in the end, but at the beginning, is I'd get this crazy high from it. Like, I'm already thinking about the next one and cancel work tomorrow and let's have a party at yours. And then we're going back to George's. George is the producer, by the way, is over there.
Absolutely.
And everyone else is already talking about going home and work tomorrow. I'm like, how can you... So actually that person that's having the one and they then move on to something else, there's nothing to be jealous of. They're not getting that chemical reaction that we were.
No, absolutely. I always say alcohol did far more for me than it was doing for the people around me. That zing that I would get off the first drink, which I can't even remember now because it was so long ago, really towards the end, alcohol just mummified me. It really did. It just made me a shell of myself, real zombie. But that
Zom then vom.
Zom then vom, yes.
Right.
Yeah, so that sort of, when I see someone having one drink now, whatever, I'm so not jealous. I'm like, oh, good for you. I would hate to have one drink now. The idea, I would get itchy sock feeling, like, where's my next? Where's my next? Where's my next? Be back in that sort of cage, in that cycle.
Yeah.
So I'm similar to you. I'm like, hats off to you, Patsy, with your one glass and your, risotto. Not for me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I've shared this before on podcasts, but, sometimes when I sort of like walk past homeless people drinking White Ace, that's when I get jealous. I'm like, yeah, that looks like my kind of time.
Absolutely. I'll like go to a lovely party and have no desire for a drink. The next morning, 10 a.m., I'll be outside some grotty tube station. There'll be like half a, empty can of, I don't know, Heineken or something. And I'll be like, ooh, I see you.
Yeah, I see you
this morning.
I'm an Arsenal fan, so I spend a lot of time walking down the Holloway Road, going up to the Emirates Stadium.
Okay,
and sometimes my my wife comes with me. She like enjoys football, and sometimes in the summer we'll be walking down Holloway Road and there's all these fancy bars or whatever, and she's like, "Oh, don't you find this a bit triggering?" I'm like, I haven't even seen them, but there's this one pub. It's just like this dingy, dark sort of place where eyeballs are on, and I look in there and I think, yeah, that's the sort of place I could do some damage. You know, there's one guy in the back.
Yeah.
You know. Give me another one.
Like yeah.
You know, sawdust on the floor kind
the
of
earlier
place.
the better.
Yeah.
Like 10 a.m.
I'm like,
dark,
that's triggering.
rotty, people in the pub. Yeah. Oh, 100% the same sort of alcoholic. That's when I really know I'm an alcoholic. You know, when I'm those moments, it's like just so, when I see someone, you know, dressed up, having, you know, sophisticated drink, just zero allure, you know. Yeah. That little nagging of vodka in the corner of an alleyway. Ooh, hi.
It's quite interesting, that kind of stigma that you talked about earlier about what society sees an alcoholic to be. It was almost like I was aspiring to get there.
Yeah.
Of no fixed abode. I mean, all these things started to happen.
Maybe me too. Yeah.
It's quite interesting. Yeah, I mean, we talked about relationships. I mean, the shakes. This is something, you know, that I could relate to, nearly having seizures and all this stuff. I think we need to talk about you being sober in your 20s, right? Because this is a bit of a ninja move going on. What's it like? I mean, you know, we're in the kind of, I don't know, are we still in the Tinder age? I don't even know what's going on.
Tinder age. I don't use Tinder. Is that's the dating app, right?
I guess so.
Yes. No, I don't. I am on another app, far more sophisticated one. No, I'm joking.
That's to let me know. Maybe they'll sponsor this show.
I am on a dating app.
Right.
Dating is very fun, but the one thing I would say, getting sober at any age, you know, hats off to you, anyone getting sober at any age, but getting sober in your 20s, I think, presents a set of unique challenges, because you must face, you know, dating, you know, the start of your career, you know, a lot of my friends haven't gotten married yet. Some of them are getting engaged. All of that sort of stuff where drinking will be inevitable. Right. I have to face now sober. So I think,
yeah, I'm going to get triggered now by lots of funerals, and you're going to get triggered by lots of weddings. Yeah. And
that's really interesting to me. So I think for me, because I know that my life, because I'm lucky in the sense that most of my relationships have mended through recovery. So I have beautiful people in my life who drink, and, you know, they take it or leave it, normal drinkers. And it's really important for me to feel comfortable and socialize with them, and for them to feel comfortable with me being there and not drinking and being part of, you know. And it's a day at a time. Like we said earlier, it's a day at a time. I definitely have more boundaries around it now. Before, you know, that element of chronic people pleasing coupled with this ultimate fear of rejection if I didn't please everyone and be all things to all people at all times, you know, really left me in, you know, despair. Whereas now I've got a little bit more self-worth going on. So I don't feel this instant impulse to say yes to everything. There's a bit more planning that goes into my socializing. I would like to say that I'm really spontaneous, but I'm a little bit, you know, into my sort of Google calendars and color coding things at the moment. And, you know, everything that's sort of jazzy that I have to get dressed up for and go out and hang out with people is in purple. So if I don't, I try not to have more than 5 purple things in the diary a week.
Interesting.
You know, just because I need those social batteries, because at the end of the day, alcohol is a social lubricant. You know, I'm aware of that. I'm quite high energy, but, you know, there's only so much time where I can spend chatting, you know, on an evening late.
What about an energy drink? Would that be part of a night out, a Red Bull or something? Or
you know what? I'd love to say no, but I have really gotten into energy drinks lately, and I'm shaming myself about it, because I feel like when I'm walking down the road with a Boost and a Kit Kat chunky peanut butter, I think, and I'm on my way to a party, and I'm like, I know, I feel like, you know, a 12-year-old with a Game Boy who's playing Fortnite all night. That's what I feel like. Right. Maybe that's just, you know, complete and utter stereotyping. But yeah, I kind of own my can of Boost.
Well, you know, we're not saints, are we? You know, and that's, you know,
sugar.
Maybe you'll be coming on in 2 years telling me about how you're sober off Red Bull a month, and we can have another conversation, but hopefully not. There's a lovely quote, actually, that just linked into what you were talking about from your interview. It says, when I got sober and set boundaries, I was met with resentment for my newly found ability to say no. I think that's something that is very common in recovery, right? We're often usually the first to be blamed because of our drinking, and sometimes rightly so, absolutely. But sometimes things can get toxic, and there can be like a story that we're always wrong, right? And that's also cannot be true. And then what happens is you get into recovery, you get some self-worth and self-respect, and you start putting boundaries in, and people don't like it because, number one, we never used to do it. These are generalizations, but it's quite common. And number two, it's like, well, who are you to be putting boundaries in because you were Mr. Drunkie for such a long time? So it's all kind of a bit weird, particularly in early recovery. But talk to me about that. You enjoy putting boundaries in now, do you?
Enjoy is probably a little bit far.
Okay.
No, I have to. They're essential to my recovery. I've got to stay in the middle of the bed in recovery, which means I've got to show myself a level of compassion that I would show other people. So I've got to take care of myself. I've got to, make sure that I'm eating, getting enough sleep. These are basic things for most people, but for me, they're really things I have to work hard at. And yeah, I did find that there was resentments towards boundaries because I was Mrs. Yes before, Miss Yes. MK will say yes, whatever you need, whenever you need it, I'll say yes. Because in between those binges, the remorse and guilt and shame that I felt was so bad that if anyone wanted anything from me, it had to be yes, because that was the only way I was going to survive. If somebody 100%. Else just said, thank you, and that's no way to live, this constant need for this outside source of, you're doing okay. This is, validating me. There has to be, it's an inside job. It's a real inside job, recovery. Everything that I seek to, if I want to give you compassion, I have to show myself compassion. If I want to give somebody else love, I have to show myself love. It's inside out, and I never had that before. I was just I wasn't a saint by any means. I mean, you've read the articles, but, I would give. And I would, my relationships felt very one-sided at times. Whereas now I feel like I can put up my hand and say, yeah, I'm not okay. Can we have a chat? And I can say, sorry, I can't make it. I've had a hectic week and I can't make you a party or whatever. And those are probably, trivial examples, but they're all really important.
They sure are, because they build up and, and it gets quite exhausting, doesn't it? People pleasing and not having boundaries. I mean, it's something that I actually probably enjoy too much now. Unfortunately, I've probably gone a little bit too far the other way, having been completely in the opposite direction. And it's probably something I need to address. But, I can be a bit brutal with friends sometimes. They're like, oh, why don't you want to come? You're busy. I'm like, no, I just don't want to come.
Okay. Wow. Okay. I'm not there yet.
I'm like, I don't want to come, but I'd be delighted to see you on another day. I know. And I probably need to be a little softer now. Looking back, you're 16 months nearly?
Yes.
All right. Now, obviously, I'll be 10 years next year. I still remember my first year very, very well. But obviously, with time, memories do fade a little bit. So obviously, you're much closer to that first year, particularly to people who are maybe starting that journey. Maybe they're sober curious. Maybe, who knows, people who are chronic and severe like us, who are very early. Talk us through your first year, because I'm going to be real honest. I left treatment like a raw nerve in the wind. Like, there were some people in my treatment center who were like, leaving, going through the gate, getting their phone. Everyone's like giving them a high five, and they look so strong. They look so well. Like I walked out of there still shaky, very, very nervous. And my first 3 months, if I'm honest with you, were really, really incredibly difficult. And then it just slowly got better and better and better. Just take us through kind of your first year.
Bit. I had a similar experience to you. I saw people kind of, blossom in rehab and spring out of there, with a spring in their step or whatever. That was not my case either. I was very physically addicted in the end. I went into rehab with a fractured foot that I didn't know I had. I just had this awful pain that I was walking around on. And I left rehab, in a similar state, quite vulnerable. And my first 4 months, I say to anyone new or, trying to get sober, 4 months was a real turning point for me. People talk about 6 months. 4 months was big for me. the first month was rehab. Then I just really, like, I did what it says in the tin, you know, I didn't drink, I didn't think, and I tried not to think, surrounded myself by recovery, you know. I had smart feet. They got me to the places I needed to go to stay sober a day at a time. And that's all I did. I didn't work. I didn't do anything. I didn't really socialize. You know, I kept myself super, super safe because, to be honest, when I left rehab, I did not trust myself. I did not walk out of there full of beans and recovery going, I've got this. I was quite fearful leaving.
Same.
Which was a healthy fear now. Anyone who tells me, you know, they're leaving treatment and they're worried, I say, good. The worst thing that can happen to me at any point is that I'm really, really confident in my recovery. You know, day at a time, I have a level of assurance that it's going to be okay. But it's like a daily maintenance. I will wake up tomorrow with an alcoholic head, and before I open my eyes, it'll be telling me, you know, you're not good enough. You're a piece of shit. You need to do this, and I need reprieve from that. Otherwise, I will drink.
Yeah.
And then I've got, you know, a solution to plug into. So yeah, it's always going to be a day at a time.
I know it's tricky talking about the solution that you plug into for various reasons. And you know, for a lot of people, it's a very sort of private thing. I wonder if we could just delve a little bit more into that. You don't have to get so specific unless you want to, but
yeah, well, I mean, also, yeah, it is one of those tricky things because, you know, I go to a lot of meetings around recovery, and it's also, you know, trying to find the fine line of being open about your recovery, which is something I've actually struggled with, you know, being really open about my recovery and trying to do something to help people who can't get sober, but also maintain that element of, you know, privacy around, you know, respecting, you know, an anonymous sort of group, if you will. But yeah, I do a lot of meetings. I do a lot of, you know, I work a 12-step recovery program to the best of my ability, a day at a time. And that is a huge part of my sobriety. I wouldn't be sober without it. And also, I get it, you know, there's a huge level of anonymity that needs to take place, but at the same time, if we don't talk about how we got well, how are we going to help somebody else?
And you're not breaking anyone else's anonymity
exactly
right now,
only my own. yeah
and also you've not been specific with letters of the alphabet, so technically speaking you've not done it, you know. Meeting could mean anything. Guys were just hanging out in you know, meeting rooms in Oxford Circus, in random buildings. People can read between the lines.
Absolutely.
I had something very odd happen to me in early recovery as well. Throughout the first year, I'd get frequent pink clouds. For anyone, you're nodding, for anyone who doesn't know what a pink cloud is, I think for me what it meant was that my sort of dopamine receptors came alive again. My fear was going down, and that was replaced with excitement. I can actually remember the day it happened. I was about 3 months sober. I was coming out of Swiss Cottage tube station. I was walking up some steps and the sun was out, and I'd woken up for 90 days with a deep pit of fear in my stomach, and it was like it did a flip. And instead of being fearful, I was excited for the day. And I remember actually ringing someone up that was part of my community. And I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I feel excited to be alive. And I hadn't had that for 90 days or thereabouts. And then I was just on this kind of like, this pink cloud for a few weeks, actually. And it was like being high, but I wasn't high. Did you experience that?
Yeah, I definitely had moments of pink clouds. Similarly, I recall an experience walking down Portobello Road, and I was sort of waiting for this sort of, you know, divine moment where everything would click into place and I'd suddenly understand the way people who are maybe your level of sobriety understood, all perceived in my head, you know, that I just need to get all of this now. And I was about just over 4 months, and I was walking down Portobello Road, and it wasn't a particularly nice day, but I just remember this feeling of calm that came over me. And I was on my way to meet a friend of mine for lunch, and I just felt this sort of like hug from the universe, if I could say it was like that. And it just sort of told me everything was going to be okay. And I just put my palms, I do this often now when I'm, you know, struggling with trying to control you, me, everything, you know, George, the whole lot. I just go like this. I clench my fist really tight, and then I just open them, and I'm like, palms to the universe. What's meant to land will land. And just even feeling the air on my palm just like allows me to acknowledge that, you know, I'm not the only entity right now, and there's so many more powers at work. And just really being able to let go, because I think addiction is hugely this battle of trying to control everything. And that day, that was a pink cloud moment, the calm. I don't think I have many of those pink cloud moments. I do try when I'm in beautiful places.
Apart from the last hour with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I sort of worry about the pink cloud. When I see other people experiencing it, I'm like, wow, I want some of that. I'd love to be on that cloud with them,
Yeah.
But who knows?
I guess now I see a pink cloud just a bit like a natural high, which I can get bursts of for sure. And you'll get loads. Don't worry, they're coming your way. I think in early recovery, it's a different thing though, because it's so like extreme. You can go from one, like up there to right down there. I'm to the point where I thought maybe I've got bipolar disorder. I remember actually thinking that.
Wow.
And then it leveled out.
Yeah.
A big backdrop to all of this, and we're running out of time, unfortunately, to really go into the depth that I'd like to, but is undiagnosed ADHD at the beginning. Where does ADHD come in relation to your journey with alcohol? How do you see it as playing a role in this story?
I think when it comes to my ADHD, it accelerated my alcoholism. It led me to that rock bottom that we started with much faster, I think, had I not had ADHD, because the sort of executive functioning that you are relatively deficient in when you have ADHD, like, working memory, impulse control, that idea that I'm staying away from a drink tonight. I'm not going to drink. And then suddenly I'm 3 glasses in and I don't know how I've got there. I find that incredibly linked to ADHD, that poor impulse control. So I think in terms of linking the two, it just accelerated my journey into chronic alcoholism.
Do you think it's just as simple as a lot of people with ADHD sort of lack dopamine and it gives you a bit of dopamine? Do you think it's that simple, or do you think you've just alluded to another kind of component? Is there any other components? I mean, one that struck me on your Instagram account, something that my sister sent to me, because my sister's got ADHD. She sent to me, is it rejection sensitivity?
Dysphoria.
These terms, which I'm learning about and I want to learn more about, they seem, for want of a better phrase, triggering. And do things like that kind of make it more likely you're going to reach for the bottle, I guess, is what I'm talking about?
I think so, because I think with ADHD, in my experience, I've suffered definitely with the fear of rejection all my life, but I've also been quite ambitious and creative, which puts me in the firing line to be rejected. And I've experienced rejection lots and lots of times in various different ways in my life. But I feel the level of sensitivity associated with it, it's that inability to just brush it off and dust down and say, okay, I'll try better tomorrow. It really stings. And I think when you have ADHD, when it's undiagnosed, everything stings. Everything feels harder. Everything feels like it requires 10-step, when the person who's neurotypical, it requires 2 steps. Even things like, for me, like leaving the house with my shoes on and not my slippers on. Yes, that happens to everyone. Lots of times they leave the house. But for me, it's like, I almost need a sticky note to be like, put on your shoes, Right. Things that come naturally to other people. I have to set 3 or 4 alarms to be at places. I have to set the travel time to go to places. There's a lot of planning involved in, successfully managing ADHD, and that sort of chaos that ensues in your mind with ADHD is quite linked to the sort of insufferable head of an alcoholic.
Yeah, I can imagine. And there's something called time blindness, is that right? Which sounds a bit terrifying if you then throw an addiction as well,
my God, it's terrifying.
So
yes.
What is that? Does that mean that you're more likely to be late? What does that mean?
For me, it's definitely more likely to be late. Or, as one thing for me is I will know that it takes me X amount of time to do something. Let's say, okay, I'm going to make a casserole. I don't cook, so I don't know why I'm using this example, but I'm going to make a casserole. Let's say it's 40 minutes. I've done this 10 times previously. I will not know that takes 40 minutes when I go to do it, and I will allow 20 minutes, and I'll also be on my way to, I don't know, a tennis lesson, and you know what I mean? And it'll be a bit of a shit show, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
So I think it plays into that thing. No matter how many times you do something and you know that, okay, this takes 40 minutes, you won't allow 40 minutes for it.
Yeah.
And you kind of get caught up and engrossed and you can't multitask or get out of it. That ability to transition from one task to another, I find very hard.
Right. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to end on this question before George kicks us out. But you were very much on time today.
I was.
So can I read into this that being sober has helped you with your ADHD, or is that too...
Massively.
Okay.
You can read into it massively. They go together, less chaos in the mind, no alcohol-induced blackouts. So I know what day it is.
Yeah, right.
I believe today's Wednesday.
You can remember to write that Post-it note for that thing? Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely linked, calmer life, calmer living, I obviously still am late at times, but it's just nowhere near the degree it was.
Oh, I'm so annoyed that we're out of time, but we are. MK, it's been amazing to meet you today.
Thank you, Oliver. It's been great.
And I'd love to have you back again on the pod. Maybe we can find out, when, in a year's time, how you're getting on or something. It'd be amazing.
Sounds great.
It's been absolutely brilliant to chat to you. And please keep writing. And I know you're really, really busy in the sober space as well, which is fantastic. What we're going to do is I'm going to put in the show notes links to everything that we can find. I'll chat to MK in a moment about everything. So head to the show notes now. But we are out of time. Thanks again for coming down.
Thank you for having me.
So welcome. So like I say, go to the show notes. Lots on MK there. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit subscribe. It really helps. Share the link with someone that will find this conversation powerful or useful. Spotify, give us 5 stars. Apple, the same. And I've not let you down yet. I will see you in 2 weeks' time for a brand new episode. Until then, look after yourself and thanks for watching or listening.